Well, what an amazing way to begin a day. All of these awards and gifts, fantastic. Thank you, and thank you to the two girls wherever they disappeared to. And good morning to everyone. Beautiful sunny morning, butterflies outside. And I just wish that I could speak to you in your own language, but unfortunately I can't. Luckily, there is the wonderful, amazing invention of having simultaneous translation, so you can hear Spanish in your ears. However, I can bring another language into this space. The language that you would hear if you came with me to Gombe National Park in Tanzania. And if we're lucky and we go out in the morning like this, we hear the chimpanzees greeting the day. And it sounds like that means this is me, this is Jane. You can hear it if you go to the zoo. I think there are still chimpanzees in the zoo. At any rate, let me go back for a minute right to the start of my life. In fact, that journalist got it wrong. It was my father who gave me that chimpanzee. And it was my parents' friends who said that I would be traumatized, and how could they possibly let me have an awful creature like that? Because Jubilee is about this big, and I still have Jubilee. He's now 78 years old, so he's too old to travel. My love of animals indeed started when I was very small, even before I had Jubilee. And fortunately, my mother was really wise. For example, when I was 4.5 years old, I had the wonderful excitement of going to stay for a holiday in the country on a farm, a proper farm where cows and horses graze in the fields and pigs also rootle in the fields, and chickens peck around in the farmyard. And this was exciting because we lived in London, in the city, where there weren't so many animals. Well, I was given a job to help collect the hens' eggs. And I was going around with my little basket, and mostly the hens laid their eggs in these small hen houses. And so I would open the lid of the nest box and take out the egg and put it in my little basket. But apparently I began asking everybody, but where is the hole on the hen big enough for the egg to come out? Because I could not see a hole like that. Nobody told me to my satisfaction, so I decided I would have to find out for myself. And this is what I remember so clearly, seeing a hen. She was brown, and she was going into her little hen house, and I remember thinking, she's going to lay an egg. And I crawled in after her, and of course that was a big mistake, and with squawks of fear, she flew out. And again, remember, I'm only 4.5 years old, but I remember thinking, no hen will lay an egg here. This is a frightening place. And so I went into an empty hen house and waited, and waited, and waited, which was fine for me, but my poor family had no idea where I was. And they were out searching, and apparently I was gone for about 4 hours, which is a long time sitting in a stuffy little hen house. And my mother is getting more and more worried, and then she sees this excited little girl rushing towards the house. And so easily she could have been angry. How dare you go off without telling us? Don't you dare do that again. Which would have killed all the excitement. But she saw my shining eyes and sat down to hear the wonderful story, how a hen lays an egg. Now the reason I tell you that story is because if you look back on it, isn't that the making of a little scientist? The curiosity, asking questions, not getting the right answer, deciding to find out for yourself, making a mistake, not giving up, and learning patience. It was all there when I was 4.5, and thanks to that amazing mother, that scientific curiosity was encouraged and it grew. She helped me find books about animals, thinking I would learn to read more quickly. And of course I did. And I think here, do you all know Tarzan of the Apes? You know the books about Tarzan? Yes? Well, we couldn't afford new books when I was small. So we either got books from the library or books from second-hand bookshops. And I found this little book. I still have it. I had just enough money to buy it. I was 10 years old. And I took it home and read it. And of course, I fell passionately in love with this glorious lord of the jungle living out with wild animals. And the wretched Tarzan went and married the wrong Jane, which was very frustrating. At any rate, I knew there was no Tarzan, but I decided from that moment I would grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals and write books about them. Everybody laughed at me. How would I do that? No money. Africa was far off, the dark continent. World War II was raging. And I was just a girl. Girls didn't have those adventurous opportunities back then. But although everyone laughed at me and said, Jane, dream about something you can actually achieve. My mother said, if you really want something like this, you're going to have to work really hard, and you will have to take advantage of opportunities. But the most important thing is never give up. And I repeat to you what my mother said, because I'm saying the same thing to all of you. If you have a dream, something you really want to do, don't let people laugh you out of it. If you really want to do it, then, as my mother said, work hard, take advantage of opportunity, and don't give up. So, well, I left school. There was no money for university. And so it was again my mother who said, well, do a secretarial course. Then perhaps you can get a job in Africa. So that's what I did. And before I got to Africa, I was working in London, and I spent almost every lunch hour in the Natural History Museum. So I have a long relationship to natural history museums. And I was learning about animals in Africa. And I was also learning something about early man, prehistory. So when I eventually had a letter from a school friend inviting me to Kenya for a holiday, I saved up money by working as a waitress until I had enough money for a return fare by boat. And then off I went by myself. I was 23 years old. And I soon heard about the late Louis Leakey, the famous paleontologist who's found so many remains of early man, our earliest ancestors in Africa. And he was curator of the Natural History Museum. And when somebody said, Jane, you need to meet Louis Leakey, I went to the museum. And he took me all around and he asked me so many questions. We went to the room where there were the fishes and the insects and of course the mammals and the birds. And he was amazed, I think, at how many of his questions I could answer, because I'd spent all these hours in the Natural History Museum in London. And he offered me a job as his secretary. You see how wise my mother was. That's what she said. Learn how to be a secretary. And so it was really more like being an assistant. He dictated a few letters, but you know, I was in the museum and I was meeting all the people who knew about the animals. And that led to him offering me the opportunity of going to study and live with not any animal, but chimpanzees, the creatures more like us than any other. It took a year before I got permission to go to Gombe National Park, because the local authorities didn't want responsibility for this young girl, and it took about a year to find money for a young girl who'd never been to university to go and study chimpanzees. Finally, had the money, had the permission, and off I went and began to learn about the chimpanzees. But it was very difficult because they'd never seen anything like me before. I mean, for them, I was a white ape, because we are apes. We are the fifth great ape. Whether you know it or not, that's what we are. And so the big problem was that as soon as they saw me, they ran away. They disappeared into the vegetation. But eventually, because I wore the same colored clothes each day, I didn't try to get too close too quickly, and eventually one of them, I called him David Greybeard because he had this white beard, and he began to actually come into my camp where there was an oil palm with fruit, and he'd always been there. Just because my tent was there, he decided he would still come to that tree. And one day he stole some bananas, and I asked my cook to leave bananas out. And David took to coming, and some of his friends came with him. And gradually, because of this, out in the wild, they got used to me. And I was able to begin to learn about their amazing behavior. We didn't know back then how like us biologically they are. We didn't know that we share 98.6 or 98.2% of DNA with chimpanzees. So that means there's only just over 1% difference in the structure of our DNA, us and chimps. And we didn't know back then about the similarities in the blood and the immune system, nor did we know the extent to which the anatomy of the chimp brain is so like ours, with a big difference that ours is bigger. As I began to learn about their behavior, that was what really fascinated me. The fact that when two chimpanzees greet each other, they may kiss, they may hug, pat one another, even hold and sort of shake hands sometimes. Or if it's two males and they're a bit wanting to prove which one is superior to the other, the swaggering, the sort of like great white hunter image, or shaking the fist. And what really fascinated me, though, was the behavior of the mother and her family. So now I want to look back from this vantage point at this mother-child relationship, because we know so much. I learned it gradually. But we now know the female has her first baby in the wild when she's about 13, maybe 12. Then she only has one child every 5 years. That's long spacing. And during that time, the child is suckling and riding on the mother's back and sharing her sleeping platform, her night nest at night. And then when the next baby is born, that 5-year-old child has to stop suckling and sleeping with mum, but still travels around with the mother and the new brother or sister. And so the bonds between mother and older child get stronger and stronger, and the bonds between brothers and sisters get stronger and stronger. And then when the third child comes along, and the oldest one is now 10 or 11, that 10 and 11-year-old is still spending a lot of time with the family. And indeed, throughout life, the family members spend a lot of time together. And chimpanzees can live to be 60 years in the wild, and even longer in captivity. So these family relations last through life. And interestingly, there are good mothers and bad mothers in chimp society, just as in our society. And the good mothers, like my mother, are supportive. They support their youngster if the child gets into difficulties with another individual, even if it means they maybe attack themselves. And so the offspring of these good mothers tend to do much better as they grow up. The males get a higher position in the male hierarchy, and the females are better mothers. But most females in the wild never have more than 3 because there's high infant mortality. And so for this reason, wild chimpanzees do not overpopulate their environment, which is one way in which they differ from us. We are overpopulating many parts of the planet, which is one of the reasons that we have the sort of problems we face today. At any rate, I went on learning about the chimpanzees. Louis Leakey told me, after I'd been there nearly 2 years, that I would have to go to university because I would need to get my own funds in the future. He wouldn't always be around. And I would need a PhD for that. I would need to get a doctorate. So although I'd never been to college, he found me a place in Cambridge University to do a PhD in ethology. I got this letter way out in Gombe. There was no internet in those days. I didn't know what ethology meant. I had to wait for telegrams to go back and forth. And of course it means studying animal behavior. So I get to Cambridge University, and the professors told me I had done everything wrong. First of all, the chimpanzees shouldn't have had names. There'd be no David Graybeard, Flo, Goliath, Mike, and all the others that became very famous through the National Geographic. And I couldn't talk about chimpanzees having personalities. I couldn't talk about them having minds capable of solving problems. And I certainly couldn't talk about them having emotions like happiness, sadness, fear, and so on. But fortunately, I had a teacher all through my childhood who taught me that the professors were wrong. That teacher was my dog. You can't share your life with a dog or a cat or a rabbit or a horse and not know that of course animals have personalities. In fact, I know people who study fishes, who study birds, who say of course they have personalities. And of course they have emotions and can feel happy and sad and fearful. We know it. And the intelligence of animals is something that is being more and more widely appreciated. First of all, yes, chimpanzees can use and make tools. That was one of my early observations that was very exciting. And seeing David Graybeard pick a grass stem, push it down into the hole in a termite nest, pull it out with the termites biting on with their mandibles, and pick them off. And I saw him pick a leafy twig, and before he could use that as a tool, he had to remove the leaves. That's the beginning of tool making. And that was a very exciting observation. We now know that chimpanzees use many different objects as tools for many different purposes. And we now know the young ones learn about the tool-using behavior of their particular population by observing, imitating, practicing, just like our children. So all the time learning more and more how like us chimpanzees are. At any rate, I got my PhD. I went back to Gombe. I started building up a research station. And it was a fantastic life, still continuing to learn about the chimpanzees and at the same time learning about all the other amazing things that were being discovered about animals as more and more people went out into the field, studying elephants with their amazing social life and intelligence and memories, studying lions, studying whales, much more difficult because they're under the water, learning about their amazing language that they use. And today, there are people who are fascinated by the intelligence of birds. And even the latest interest is the intelligence of the octopus. Yes, and if you don't believe me, Google, not now, but afterwards, Google octopus with coconut shell. You see what happens. It's a 1 minute little thing which will make you laugh and laugh, but you will be amazed. So there we are. We humans are not the only beings with personalities, minds, and emotions. And it was the chimpanzees who helped to break down the barrier that was thought to exist, separating us completely from the rest of the animal kingdom. And we now know we are part of and not separated from the rest of the animal kingdom. Why did I leave Gombe? Such a beautiful place. We're still learning about the chimpanzees. There's still a research team there. And the reason I left is because back in 1986, I realized that right across Africa, chimpanzee numbers were decreasing. Chimpanzee habitats were being destroyed. Chimps were being killed for food in the illegal bushmeat trade. That's the commercial hunting of wild animals for food. There was the live animal trade, mothers shot to steal the babies, to sell them, to send to far-off countries for entertainment, or back then even medical research. And so I knew I had to try and do what I could to help the chimpanzees. And I traveled around Africa, learning more and more about the problems faced by the chimps, but also about the problems faced by the African people, and realizing that many of those problems were caused by big multinational corporations, deciding I should also go and start talking about these things in Europe and in Asia, and in America, North America, then South America. And learning all the time more and more about the problems that we humans have inflicted on this planet. Learning about the destruction of habitats. Learning about the selfish behavior of the big corporations who destroy a whole area simply to make money and don't care that the animal species are becoming extinct and the people living there are becoming poorer, and the environment is being polluted and people are getting sick. So, not surprisingly, as I'm learning about all these things that we're doing to the planet, the pollution and the loss of various animals, the loss of biodiversity, I'm meeting young people like you. Many seemed not to have much hope. And I began talking to the young people, and many of them were just not seeming to care much about what happened. But some were very depressed because they thought about it, and some who thought about it were angry, even violent. And I asked them why they felt like this. And they said more or less the same: because you've harmed our future, you generation, and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, if you feel that we older generations have harmed your future, you're absolutely right. There's a small child in the front here, and I look at her and think how we've harmed the planet since I was that age, and I feel ashamed of my species. But is it true there's nothing we can do? That I don't believe. And that's why I began this program, Roots and Shoots. We're going to have some displays around the room soon about what Roots and Shoots groups in Chile are doing. So for those of you who don't know about Roots and Shoots, what is it? It started in Tanzania with 12 high school students who came to my house in Dar es Salaam. And they came from 9 different schools, and they wanted to talk to me about the problems they saw in the environment around them. The dynamiting to catch fish, which was destroying the coral reef where the fish breed. The poaching in the national parks, with the government not doing enough to catch the poachers and punish them. The street children in the city, people weren't looking after them well enough. The animals in the market left out in the hot sun with no water. The stray dogs, homeless dogs in the street. And they wanted to find ways of putting these problems right. So they went back to their 9 schools and they got their friends, and we had a big gathering of all the young people who wanted to see change. And that's when Roots and Shoots began. And right from the beginning, the main message of Roots and Shoots is that every single one of us, that's everybody in this room, makes a difference of some sort every single day. You may think you can live through a day without making a difference, but if you really think about it, you'll find you make some kind of impact. And so, right from the start, because chimpanzees seem to be a bridge between us and the rest of the animal kingdom, we decided that every group of Roots and Shoots would choose 3 projects, one to help people, one to help other animals, and one to improve the environment that we all share. That's how it began. And the young people were very imaginative, and they were thinking of different projects to do. And we brought them all together. And the program began to spread through Tanzania, just through word of mouth, through one student leaving to go to another school and deciding that it was important to have a Roots and Shoots group there. And then gradually the program began to spread out of Tanzania into other parts of the world. And we had a gathering of Roots and Shoots leaders, 18-year-old mostly, they were university students from different parts of the world, sharing what they were doing in their different countries. And today, Roots and Shoots is in 140 countries, and it's growing strong in Chile and other parts of Latin America. And we may have just started Roots and Shoots in Cuba. I think so. That will be 141, the 141st Roots and Shoots group. And we have members now, Roots and Shoots members, in preschool, little tiny creatures. And they still, some of them love messing about with insects, and some of them love helping each other, and some of them love working in the environment and planting trees and growing vegetables and things like that. But we also have very strong Roots and Shoots in universities around the world. And of course we have middle school and high school, primary school, senior school. And it's really making a difference. People ask me, do I really have hope for the future, knowing all the terrible things that are happening? And you know about those terrible things that are happening. And one of my biggest reasons for hope is young people like you, because everywhere I go, whether there are Roots and Shoots groups or similar kinds of groups, I see young people with shining eyes wanting to tell Dr. Jane what they've been doing to make this a better world. And that has to be exciting, it has to be hopeful. Young people do have hope. And what makes me really angry, and I don't know if anybody's ever said this to you, but I have heard people standing up, addressing groups like you, as I'm doing now, and talking about the mess that we've made of the world and saying, you guys, it's your responsibility to put it right. You're going to be the next guardians of the planet. It's not your responsibility. One day it may be. Right now, it's our responsibility to help you to find ways so that when you grow up and move out into this world, you will be equipped and ready and determined to fight to make things better. And that's to make things better for people, animals, the environment. And one of the things that Roots and Shoots has done, just grew all by itself, is, okay, this program is breaking down the walls that we love to build between people of different nations, between people of different cultures, between people of different religions, and between people and the natural world. We're breaking down those barriers. We're bringing together young people from Israel and Palestine. We're bringing together young people from Iran and Iraq and Syria, not from the countries where they are now, but those in exile, and talking about the differences and how we can work together to try and create a better world in the future, a world with less terrorism, a world with less fear, where people don't have to leave their homes and travel across the land to find refuge somewhere else. So if it sometimes seems difficult to you, the mess that we've made of the world, it is. I can't pretend anything else. But nevertheless, because of the energy and commitment of young people, once you know what the problems are and you are empowered and encouraged and inspired to take action, then it starts to change. And there's also this amazing brain we have. The biggest difference between us, chimpanzees, and other animals is this explosive development of our intellect. So chimpanzees, other animals, way more intelligent than people used to think. But even the brightest chimpanzee who can use a computer is quite stupid compared to a person who can design a rocket that goes up to Mars, from which crawls a little robot that is still taking photographs of the surface of Mars and sending them down for us to look at on planet Earth. So isn't it peculiar that the most intellectual creature that's ever walked on planet Earth is destroying its only home? We can't go and live on Mars. We know that now. It's not hospitable at all. We've got planet Earth, and we've got to stop destroying it. And we've got to stop thinking that money is the only God. That's what happens with the big corporations. They've lost the connection between this clever brain and the human heart. That's love and compassion. And they're making a big decision, like, we will sell this pesticide to the people in this poor country so that we can grow crops and we can kill the insects. And yes, it probably will give the people working there cancer, but it will give us a big return on our money. We'll get richer. The next shareholders meeting will be a big success for us. Those are the kind of decisions that show there's a disconnect between the head and the heart. That's what we have to mend, that disconnect, and that's what I think you young people can do. We need money to live. We mustn't live for money. That's where it goes wrong. And it was Mahatma Gandhi who said, the planet can provide enough for human need. The planet can provide enough for human need, but not for human greed. And you know, it's been proved that money doesn't necessarily bring happiness. Once you have enough money, you have a decent sort of life, you can be very happy. If you go on striving to get more money and build up your bank account, yes, maybe you'll be very successful, but it's been shown you're likely to be less happy. So we want to be happy. We want to have a better world for our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And so I really hope that some of you will find out more about Roots and Shoots and join us, because we want to grow across this beautiful country. And I'm sure all of you would love to play a part in creating an environment that will be sustained into the future. So there will always be a beautiful environment. There will always be biodiversity. And when you have your children and grandchildren, you'll be able to say, well, I helped you to have a better life. Not through money, but through happiness. So that's my message for you this morning. Thank you all for coming. And again, I'm sorry I can't speak to you in Spanish, but I think we have time for some questions.